Welcome to LinesToGo installation videos. Today we will be replacing brake lines on a 2000 Toyota Tacoma 3.4-liter Xtra Cab using LinesToGo part number BLT-134-SS. While this particular installation is being performed on a 2000 Tacoma Xtra Cab, this set of lines will also fit the following year, make, and models as shown in your screen now. LinesToGo lines are made using original equipment end forms and fittings that are CNC bent for an easy and precise installation. We have also upgraded to stainless steel braided Teflon hoses for rust protection and to prevent surface fouling. These have an unlimited shelf life and anti-static PTFE liner. This set of LinesToGo lines are made using 304L stainless steel for rust resistance that exceeds OEM standards. Tech tip: disconnect the battery before working on a vehicle to reduce the risk of shorting out the battery on tools or lines. LinesToGo lines are made with a sectional design for easier installation. We also use color-coded unions on our sectioned lines. Just match the colors at the connections. Tools required: 10mm, 12mm, and 21mm sockets and ratchet, 10mm and 13mm wrenches, cutting pliers, flat blade screwdriver, drain pan, jack and jack stands. The level of difficulty for this installation is considered to be easy. Start by disconnecting the negative battery terminal using a 10mm wrench. Use a 10mm wrench to remove both threaded fittings from the master cylinder. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the driver's side threaded fitting from the T-union located underneath the master cylinder and remove the short line from the vehicle. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the two remaining fittings at the union underneath the master cylinder. Raise and support the vehicle and remove all four wheels using a 21mm socket. Inside of both front wheel wells, use a flat blade screwdriver to remove the plastic push clips that secure the rearward splash guard and position it aside. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the 5-threaded fittings from the driver's side frame-mounted unions. If the lines are seized to the fittings, you can cut the lines using a pair of cutting pliers and then remove the fitting using a socket or wrench. Remove the brake line that was attached to the rear port in the master cylinder, along with the one that was attached to the forward port in the T-union underneath the master cylinder. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the top of the left front flex hose and remove the left front brake line from the vehicle. Next, use a 10mm wrench to remove the two threaded fittings from the frame-mounted union located inside of the passenger side front wheel well. At the center of the firewall, use a 10mm socket to remove the bolt that secures the coolant flow control valve. Remove the right front brake line from the plastic clips. On the passenger side of the firewall, remove the wiring harness from the metal bracket. Use a pair of cutting pliers to cut the right front brake line near the wiring harness connection. Remove both sections of the top right front brake line from the vehicle. Inside of the passenger's front wheel well, use a 10mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the top of the right front flex hose and remove the line from the vehicle. Underneath the vehicle, use a 12mm socket to remove the two bolts that secure the plastic brackets that secure the lines to the frame. Remove the lines from any remaining plastic clips. In front of the fuel tank, use a pair of cutting pliers to cut both rear brake lines. Remove both forward sections of the rear brake lines from the vehicle. Remove the rear sections of the rear brake lines from the plastic clips along the frame. You can use a long screwdriver to access the clips between the fuel tank and the frame. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the two forward threaded fittings from the rear load sensing valve. Slide the rear lines back a few inches to route them underneath the crossmember at the front of the fuel tank. Remove the two rear lines from the vehicle through the driver's side rear wheel well. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the top of the rear flex hose. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the top inboard threaded fitting from the load sensing valve and remove the line from the vehicle. At the rear axle, use a 12mm socket to remove the bolts that secure the axle line mounting clips and remove the clips from the lines. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the two threaded fittings from the bottom of the rear flex hose. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the left rear wheel cylinder and remove the left rear axle line from the vehicle. Use a 10mm wrench to remove the threaded fitting from the right rear wheel cylinder and remove the right rear axle line from the vehicle. To begin the installation of your new stainless steel LinesToGo brake lines, start by installing the right rear axle line labeled 06E into position. Start one fitting into the rear flex hose union and the other fitting into the right rear wheel cylinder. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Next, install the left rear LinesToGo axle line labeled 06D into position. Start one fitting into the rear flex hose union and the other fitting into the left rear wheel cylinder. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Replace the clips that support the axle lines and secure them using a 12mm socket. Next, install the LinesToGo rear brake line labeled 06C into position. Start one fitting into the top inboard port in the load sensing valve. Start the other fitting into the top of the rear flex hose and tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Next, install the LinesToGo line labeled 06B into position, routing the line through the left rear wheel well. Start the rear threaded fitting into the top forward-facing port in the load sensing valve. Next, install the LinesToGo brake line labeled 05C into position, routing the line through the left rear wheel well. Start the rear threaded fitting into the bottom forward-facing port in the load sensing valve. Secure the lines into the plastic clips along the frame and tighten both fittings at the load sensing valve using a 10mm wrench. Install the next section of the LinesToGo rear brake line labeled 06A into position. Start the front threaded fitting into the rearmost frame-mounted union. Connect the two sections of line using the supplied union, noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Secure the line into the plastic clips along the frame. Tighten the fitting in the frame-mounted union using a 10mm wrench and tighten the LinesToGo union using a 10mm and a 13mm wrench. Next, install the rear LinesToGo brake line labeled 05B into position. Start the front threaded fitting into the rear of the forward frame-mounted union. Connect the sections of line using the supplied union, noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Secure the line into the plastic clips along the frame. Tighten the fitting in the frame-mounted union using a 10mm wrench and the LinesToGo union using a 10mm and a 13mm wrench. Replace the brackets removed earlier and secure them using a 12mm socket. Next, install the LinesToGo line labeled 05A into position and start the bottom threaded fitting into the top of the forward frame-mounted union. Start the top fitting into the forward-facing port in the factory union located underneath the master cylinder. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Next, at the right front wheel well, install the bottom section of the right front brake line labeled 04C into position. Start the fittings into the right front flex hose and the horizontal port in the frame-mounted union by hand. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Install the next section of the right front LinesToGo brake line labeled 04B into position. Start the bottom fitting into the top port in the frame-mounted union. Next, install the final section of the right front LinesToGo brake line labeled 04A into position. Start one fitting into the passenger side port in the union located underneath the master cylinder. Connect the two sections of line using the supplied union, noting the LinesToGo color-coded connection. Secure the line into the plastic clips along the firewall. Tighten the fitting in the factory union using a 10mm wrench and the LinesToGo union using a 10mm and a 13mm wrench. Replace the coolant flow control valve using a 10mm socket. Secure the wiring harness to the metal bracket. Inside of the driver's side front wheel well, install the left front brake line labeled 03 into position. Start one fitting into the top of the left front flex hose and the other fitting into the forward-facing port in the front frame-mounted union. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Next, install the primary LinesToGo brake line labeled 01 into position. Start the bottom threaded fitting into the top port in the rearmost frame-mounted union. Start the top fitting into the rear port in the master cylinder. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Next, install the secondary line labeled 02 into position. Start one fitting into the front port in the master cylinder and the other fitting into the driver's side port in the union located underneath the master cylinder. Tighten both fittings using a 10mm wrench. Replace the plastic splash guards in the front wheel wells using the plastic push clips. Bleed all four wheels and the load sensing valve using a 10mm wrench, making sure to keep the master cylinder reservoir topped up with fluid. Replace all four wheels and torque to the manufacturer's recommended specification using a 21mm socket. Reconnect the negative battery terminal using a 10mm wrench. This concludes the installation of stainless steel brake lines on a 2000 Toyota Tacoma Xtra Cab using LinesToGo part number BLT-134-SS. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any questions or would like to purchase the lines you saw today, please call us at 1-855-781-5992, email us at info@linestogo.com, or check out our website link below. Don't forget to take advantage of our free next day shipping. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button below, and we will see you in our next video.